I'd like to start maybe with AJ and Tim, and then Josh, you can share your thoughts on this too. What are you guys looking for in founders? I know, Tim, you were a multi-founder. What are you guys looking for in these founders that you invest in, and then also the early stage companies that you invest in? Like, what separates the yeses from the nos when you guys are making your decisions? If you could gear it maybe to the deep tech space a little bit in general. And then Josh, for you, it's more or less, what companies have you seen that founders or early stage companies that you've seen, get these grants, and what you've seen work really well? And we can start with AJ if you want, and then we can kind of move on down to finish with Josh.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of the second question is easier than the first question, which is, what are you looking at, in terms of the types of companies? We have like very few like outright limitations on what it is that we'll look at, even though we have focus areas. One of the things that you get to do as a seed investor is consider things that like didn't exist before, and so you can't really narrow the aperture to small, or you would miss things that we invested in, like Indiegogo before crowdfunding was a thing, or Plated before meal kits were a thing, and sort of stuff like that. But our kind of guidepost is that the business or the market or the problem that the founder is trying to address should have at least $100 million revenue possibility attached to it. Doesn't mean tomorrow, doesn't mean next week, it doesn't mean next year. It means that realistically the market or the problem that the company is trying to tackle is big enough for it to be appropriate to accept venture capital, which is dilutive and complicated and burdensome and a huge investment in time, in addition, of course, to money that's required to sort of make that all work. And the second thing is that the founder have to have the kind of experience and connective tissue, or at least some work experience or advisory experience with the industry in which they're trying to tackle. In some industries, this is way more important than in others, but it's always important to some extent that there be a sort of an understanding of the rules and regulations and the way that an industry works. This we kind of find to be a problem from time to time in fintech and insurtech, where people come in with sort of ideas that they're going to like break everything or move fast and break stuff or whatever. In highly regulated industries, where if you're just not familiar with it, you're never going to get anywhere. But really, and this is the hardest thing to articulate, and it's the hardest thing to put into words, and it's really cliche, and kind of every VC says the same thing or feels the same way. When you meet like 20, 30 founders a week, there's just a certain energy and a certain force and like a certain, almost like delusional belief that they're going to will something into existence that's palpable on the other side of the table. And when you get somebody in your office, or these days on Zoom, who has that, it just sort of jumps off the page. You just know that this is a person who's going to like run into walls and like move those walls to make what they're trying to happen. And unfortunately, I don't know how to create a recipe for that, or how to sort of say what it is, other than to say, like, I walked out of that meeting with a wow sensation, and sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't.
Yeah. Tim, what are your thoughts on what you're looking for?
I put a lot of thoughts. I wrote a Forbes article on this exact topic, great. Answering the question. I dropped the link into the chat.
Fantastic.
So people can check that out. And it's very similar to what AJ said, effectively, and I don't know how much time you want, so I could talk about this for hours, but so I'll just briefly hit the high points. I think something dovetailing on AJ said about work relevant experience, take it a little bit to the next level, and that I think that I really like to find a founder who is building something that I think will be his or her life's work, something that they were literally put on this planet to start this company or solve this problem, that I find to be not necessary, but the best companies that I've backed have always been that, where just it's beyond, it's not a business. It's not someone that, HBS who is searching for a problem and finds something with a big market and says oh, I'll try this for a few years. It's someone whose mother died from a disease they want to cure, or someone that was in an industry for 5 years banging their head against the wall because of some problem that now they're going to solve and sell back to their entire network that dealt with the same similar problem, for 10 years. So things like that, I think is very inspiring, and it's inspiring for investors, inspiring for potential hires, it's inspiring for customers. So I think that, is a kind of lifts, it really increases the odds of success in building a large company. Another one which is a little more nuanced and interesting, is there's a concept I call wealth effect, which is basically like, there's, I love repeat founders, but if you've like sold a company for $1 billion and you have, $250 million in the bank, generally speaking, unless you're Jack Dorsey, like you're not as hungry as, someone sitting on a futon eating ramen saying like, this has to happen for me and my family and my community and my parents and all that sort of stuff. And hunger is a really important part to the journey, I find, because like building a company is one of the hardest things you can do. And like, there are times where just like you want to give up and it's dark and it sucks and it's 4 a.m. and the servers are down and you're crying and you're like, I can't do this anymore. And every founder experiences that. And if you have, $50 to $250 million in the bank, you're going to be like, fuck this. And you're going to get on a sailboat and you're going to sail away. And if you can't do that, you'll keep fighting. And I'm not trying to, like there are founders and people and have work ethics, and it's not a moral compass or anything. It's just like, what I'm trying to do is just find the highest probability of success. And there's exceptions to every rule, but generally speaking, what I like is a founder that's had an 8-figure exit. So sold a company from like 10 to like $80 million. So they've made a little bit of money. Because on the flip side, if you're literally sitting on a futon eating ramen, in like the dangerous part of town, and you're building something and it could be a unicorn, you have maybe a 10% chance of like building a multi-billion-dollar company, but someone comes along and says, hey, can I take this off your hands for $50 million? And you're literally like, weren't worrying about paying rent next month. You're going to take that. You're going to take that deal. You're going to take $10 million, put it in your bank account, buy your parents a house, take a trip around the world and like live happily ever after. And that doesn't work for me. Like I can't have someone that's going to take an off ramp for $50 million when I need them when they're on a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. So I like people that have a little bit of money in the bank, enough that they're like slightly illogical and saying like, I'm going for it, and that can also be replaced with this whole, if you're so passionate about the problem, you're just like, money is not relevant to me and I'm going to build a massive company. I think that can kind of solve for that. I'm not saying like I only back people that, have like $1 million in the bank, but like you basically have to have something that motivates you more deeply than economics. I'll probably pause there because I could keep going, but you can read the article. There's a lot of cool stuff in there, like the struggle, like people have been through struggles, like if you've, I just think if you've been through hard times together, especially as a team, the odds of getting through the gauntlet is huge. Integrity is massive. For me, self-awareness is fundamentally important for everyone, but particularly for a CEO who like every 3 to 6 months, your job description is entirely different. When you have, 3 people in a garage and then you have like 25 people in a small office, and you have 100 and then you have like 1,000, like your job's changing constantly. If you're not self-aware and constantly developing, you can't really make it. I'll stop there. I can talk too much and I apologize.
Yeah, that was awesome. Those are fantastic points. And I think like Damon John even has a book, The Power of Broke, right? It's like, there is power in struggling and in grinding and hustling and like seeing that because it makes you focus on, it makes you want to not like continue to live that and power through it and whatnot. So I think that's huge. And I think entrepreneurship fundamentally too, from what I've seen, having successful founders and investors speak at our events as well, it's like there's so much to be said for being absolutely obsessed with something. And a lot of people say, when we ask like a similar question, they say something along the lines of, it has to, like, to start a company, it has to be something you can't not do. Like, you have to do this or it's going to drive you crazy knowing that you didn't do it. Right. And it's something that is big enough to keep you focused through the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. But I thought those points were fantastic. Yeah, your Forbes article is great too. I was just checking that out. So definitely look at that, guys. And then Josh, if you want to add to that as far as what are the companies that you've seen successful getting these grants and some of the funding through these government programs.
Sure. So I guess it's a little different here because in the world of federal funding, it splits up into two. It's what are you looking for in the founders themselves? Like what's the deal with the founders? And then there's the tech itself, because you're not just investing in a tech that's going to build the future of industry, make an exit, and then hopefully the investors see back on their investment. But they're also looking to potentially become buyers. So they're two sides of the coin, I suppose. And if I look at what do they look for in an investor, in the team itself and the founders, they're looking for either having a history of getting it done in the past, because they want to make sure that their federal dollars are going to go to people who are capable of performing on a complex research and development plan. They want to make sure that if it's not a history of getting it done, then they have the right letters at the end of their name up the belief that they could get it done, and also be patents under their names, or the company itself having filed patents for the given technology. Now those aren't mutually exclusive. You could just have great getting it done, or have the quote unquote skill set that your title indicates. But it's usually one of those two, because when the Department of Defense is splitting between investing in a company with founders that have done in the past, or they have a PhD on the board, or as one of their CTOs or main engineers, and a bunch of guys that graduated high school and are working in a garage right now. They're probably going to invest in the former. The other part, which could make the initial part totally obsolete, is the tech itself. Especially with the emergence of the interest in dual-use technology, which we were talking about a little bit before. Some federal government programs are prioritizing market traction. Others couldn't care less about it. It really depends on the program itself. But on the human side, they're looking to see what the done in the past and who they are. And then on the tech side, they're looking to say always, how is this relevant for us, and has this been tested? At least for the faster funding mechanisms. For the slower funding mechanisms, it's a good idea, it's great technology, it's a great team. Let's make the investment even though there's no market traction.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's really insightful stuff, Josh. Thank you for that.